In 1978, two men with sawed-off shotguns will hold a restaurant with over 30 patrons hostage for several hours, demanding one of their friends be freed. Until the next day, one of the men's mothers would arrive and ultimately end the siege. This event was known as the Waiters Restaurant Siege. Welcome to the Lion Kingdom. I'm the Lion King, and today I want to talk about the Waiters Restaurant Siege, a hostage situation taking place in 1978 at a restaurant called the Waiters Club in Melbourne, Australia. Yes, that is apparently how you say it. If you ask any Australian, it's Melbourne, not Melbourne, even though that's how it's spelled.
Man, come on. Oh no. You do know you're saying it completely wrong. You mean Melbourne.
Just Australia being Australia, I guess. Anyway, the Waiters Club were a young man that was part of a crime organization known as the Overcoat Gang. Amos Atkinson took over 30 people hostage for several hours until his mother was brought in to end the situation. The gang was so called because of the heavy coats they used to hide their weapons, and prison quickly becoming the scourge of the Pentridge jail by running scams, extorting money, and dishing out violent retribution to any they deemed fit. Founded by Mark Brandon Reed, nicknamed Chopper. Don't worry, we'll get to why he's nicknamed Chopper, because there's no way we can talk about this gang without talking about Mark Brandon Reed, one of Australia's most famous criminals.
My name's Mark Brandon Chopper Reed. A lot of people think I'm a tough guy. I'm not a tough guy, but I've broken a lot of men that thought they were tough guys. The lowest thing in jail is a woman basher and a rapist. If you bashed a woman, well, you're a weak, gutless individual. If you come to jail for bashing a woman or raping a woman, you will get dealt with. You will suffer. We will break your neck, you low, gutless, weak mice. Be afraid, because if you come to jail, you're going to have every bloody reason to be afraid.
Think less Al Capone, who was famous in the prime of his criminal career, and more Henry Hill from Goodfellas, who sold his story and would become more famous for the exploits he talked about after his criminal career was over and he was free. You know, he became more famous after the fact by telling people his stories.
Some guys leave the life and go quietly about their business. Others leave the life and make it a career that they've left the life. They're out of the life, but they still want to cash in on the life, and they're making it a payday.
Actually, just like Henry Hill, how Goodfellas is made about Henry Hill's life, there's a movie called Chopper that's a true crime dramatization of Chopper, of Mark Reed's life, starring Eric Bana. I think that's how you say his name, in his first major starring role. And I honestly gotta say, the man kills it. Completely unrecognizable, a transformative role. But the movie is not for the faint of heart. It's brutal, bloody, and the violence is slow and agonizing. So I do have to warn you if you decide to go watch it.
What's he doing? What's he doing? What is happening?
Sore at it.
What's happening? Jesus.
It's not like, Goodfellas, where it's, cinematography and things like that. It's violence, brutality, and blood. Before we get into Chopper, I do want to put a disclaimer here that he was known as a bit of a liar or a tall teller. He even once said, never let the truth get in the way of a good yarn. Just a side tangent, just because reading about Chopper made me think of, how when you're a kid and you want to seem more dangerous or exciting or something like that, so when something happens, you exaggerate the story. You can just keep on making it bigger and bigger. Like, for instance, me and my friends, we had a friend who would, for some reason, he would take trash cans and throw them at people's cars or houses on trash day. He was like just an idiot like that. We hung out with him because he wasn't like a psycho or anything. He wasn't skinning cats. He was just a dumbass who would do dumbass things on impulse. So anyway, he would do this, and usually people would come out, yell at us. We'd run, we'd go laugh because we were just as stupid as he was and all that. There's one dude who would come out and he yelled at us, next time y'all come around here, I'm gonna get my gun. So the next time we were walking down that street, of course he takes the trash can, throws it at the dude's car, and the dude comes out waving the gun. He shoots like twice, maybe 3 times into the air and says, y'all don't come back here. He didn't aim at us or anything. But when we told the story after that, it was, yeah, man, he aimed right at us. He was shooting at us. He had a red dot that was on our head and all this stuff. He had a machine gun and he lit the street up. Just exaggerating the story to the nth degree. If one of us hadn't pushed him over, we'd be dead right now, and all this. And every time we tell the story, we get more and more exaggerated, when in truth, he just kind of shot up in the air to scare us off because we were bad kids in a rough neighborhood. But, that's just kind of the vibe I get from Mark Reed. Like some of this stuff did happen and some of it was super exciting and crazy. but not to the degree that he wanted it to be. So he would keep on pushing and pushing and telling bigger stories, you know? I'll try and include an example or two of what I mean. Anyway, with that long tangent out the way that had nothing to do with this, I'm going to get back into it. Mark Brandon Reed, born November 17, 1954, to father Irish World War II veteran Keith Reed and his mother, who was a devout Seventh-day Adventist. And to my knowledge, a Seventh-day Adventist mostly just believe that Jesus rose on Saturday and not Sunday, so they have a calendar accordingly. They go to church on Saturdays and things like that. Anyway, Reed would grow up in the Melbourne suburbs. He was bullied at school and abused at home, saying that by the age of 15, he'd been on the losing end of several hundred fights, and his father, usually on his mother's recommendation, would often beat him. In and out of mental institutions by the age of 7, where he claims to have gone through electroshock therapy and made a ward of the state by the age of 14. Now, I just want to take a second to electroshock therapy for a 7-year-old is absolutely insane to me because, like, as far as I know, it like completely rewires parts of your brain and stuff like that. It's usually used on like more dangerous or, you know, mentally unwell people. And to use that on a 7-year-old is crazy. But, you know, this was Australia in the 60s. Crazy is just par for the course, I guess. Anyway, Reed would begin his criminal career soon after becoming an accomplished street fighter and a leader of the Saray gang, which had a notorious reputation for violence. They attacked local drug dealers, massage parlors, and other criminal gangs, shaking them down for a share of their profits. Later graduating to armed robbery, extortion, and kidnapping, Reed would build a reputation as a vicious, cold-blooded psychopath. In his books, he would go on to claim to have used bolt cutters, blowtorches, and wire cutters on several of his victims, torturing them to get them to pay up, also claiming to have killed several people, members of rival gangs, and some celebrities. Although a lot of this remains unproven or was proven impossible or even untrue, like I said, Reed was a bit of a tall teller. He wanted to build a larger-than-life presence, and it worked. With a lot of people not even being able to tell to today which of his stories are true and which were false, with some of them being corroborated, other ones being shut down entirely. But not all of Reed's stories were false or made up, as in 1974, Reed was captured and charged with a variety of offenses, including robbery, assault, and some firearms violations. He was convicted and sent to Melbourne's toughest jail, Pentridge Prisons, in the city's northern suburbs, where he would meet Jimmy Loughnan, another lifetime criminal. The two would become best friends, and another person who would be crucial to the story later. So nowadays, the gang goes by POWs, or prisoners of war. Originally, they went by the Overcoat Gang, where it was started by Reed in the Pentridge Prisons H Division, the prison's toughest division, where they sent the most ruthless, brutal prisoners with the worst offenses. They were known as the Overcoat Gang from 1975 to the early 1990s, where they changed names. Founded in 1975, just a year after Reed's arrest, and apparently they're similar in structure to the American Aryan Brotherhood, so, you know, we've all got them, I guess. In an article I found in the Sydney Herald Times, written by Andrew Rule on April 21st of 2010, called "In a Gang Started by Chopper's Christmas Sausages." The original Overcoat Gang was so called because its members wore heavy prison-issue overcoats made in the prison. The gray coats had blue patches stitched over the heart of the wearer front and back, so that armed guards in the prison towers could more easily shoot to kill in case of a riot or escape attempt. While the bulky coats did offer some protection from makeshift shivs and were ideal for hiding weapons, Reed would often wear similar coats on the rare occasions he was out of jail in the 1970s and 1980s because he could hide firearms in the pockets. Reed believes that young right-wing prisoners were initially attracted to the gang after he was photographed as a joke with 2 large prison officers wearing Ku Klux Klan hoods. Pardon the fuck out of me? 2 guards wearing what? That's why you're a penal colony now, Australia. That's exactly why you let y'all run y'all country the way y'all want. Anyway, the Overcoat Gang was born in 1975 after a painter and docker gunman, John Palmer, or Piggy as his friends would call him, accused Chopper of eating the extra Christmas sausages they were supposed to be issued for lunch. You see, Reed had previously been given a billage job to clean the showers and dish out food, moving up and down the prison on a plastic trolley. The theory, according to Reed, was that the most dangerous man in the division was given this job so that they could keep an eye on him. Predictably, Reed would go on to abuse the privilege, using his freedom to launch biological attacks on the entire division. Reed said in an interview with Pinterest Village in the 2000s, "I would get a little bit of the old doings, feces, and drop it in the stew and put a sufficient amount of Mustard Keen's curry powder to disguise the aroma." Reed would tell different versions of the story. One time he claimed to have made a culture of feces, phlegm, and other material, which after several days would sprout toadstool mushroom. He also claimed to have had his friends come in and each take turns dumping inside the food pie. He said he was once visited by members of the National Crime Authority concerned that he was creating biological weapons in the Pinterest prison. However, there is no record of any such national security scare going on. Reed would hold the billet's job until that December, and by all reports was doing a good job until he showed his immaturity during the month when he was sacked. According to the progress report, Reed claimed he was caught distributing tobacco in the division. Smoking was banned. But one of his contemporaries recalls the sacking did have something to do with putting foreign objects in the stew. So do with that what you will. And if you were in the prison's H division, I'm sorry. So Reed hadn't even been working with the food when Christmas had rolled around that year. All the inmates were pleased to hear that they would receive extra pork sausage, 2 per man. But whenever Christmas lunch came around, no one would receive their sausages. And inmates would begin to accuse Reed, given his history of food tampering and his appetite. So his popularity was already at an all-time low when Palmer would yell out, "Reed the fucking dog must have eaten them all."
Hey, you dumb bitch. Sorry for the blue language, ma'am. That's what he said.
So the next day, Reed would walk past Palmer and drop him with a right and yell out, "Teach you to call me a fucking dog, you cunt." Again, that's just what he said.
And he's holding a remote control thingy, and he says, "Hey, you dumb bitch." Again, I'm sorry, ma'am. Those were his words.
Allegedly with the knowledge of the prison guards, starting a long-running vendetta that became known as the Sausage War. Now, the crazy part that I found is that according to some reports, there may have never even been Christmas sausage. There may have never even been extra sausages. Sometimes the staff would do stuff like this to get the prisoners to be more docile and conform. It really backfired this time because it led to a long, bloody prison war, as well as Reed gaining the notoriety among the other prisoners to start his gang. Reed would gain a penchant for recruiting, mentoring, and becoming a father figure to young boys who were quick-tempered, violent, and unpredictable. That's where Amos Atkinson would come into the picture. Born to Alva Atkinson, an unknown father, raised with his 7 siblings, I couldn't find much more about Atkinson's upbringing, except he was arrested at the age of just 18 for armed robbery, known for being young, quick-tempered, violent, and unpredictable. Hey, just the type of impressionable youth Reed would recruit. He joined the gang in prison and would later work as a gunman for the crew. But according to other prisoners, Amos idolized Reed even more so than most of the others. Which brings us back around to Jimmy Loft, who in 1977 would attempt to escape with several other prisoners where they scaled the prison wall, but Jimmy would break both his legs while jumping from the walls. Father Sean Patrick O'Connell found him lying in his garden that night and took him to Farentry Gully Hospital where he was identified and arrested. Reed, who saw Jimmy as his best friend, he had just escaped from jail and broke both his ankles when he jumped the fence. So, with Reed set to be released that same year, he and Jimmy were in the yard talking. Reed would go on to say, quote, "He was in the yard there, it was raining, he was crying, his feet were blue, and he thought he was going to lose them both. He had 4, 5, maybe even 6 years to go. I said, 'Listen, Jim, when I get out of here, give me 6 months, then write to me, and I'll come get you,'" which Jimmy would seemingly forget about, never writing to Reed. He most likely thought it was an empty promise made by a friend to satiate him. But to Reed, this wasn't an empty promise, because just 6 months later, on January 26th of 1978, Reed would enter a courtroom. Now, a little bit of info on Australian courts. Apparently, they have a summer break or holiday break, usually from December 23rd to January 31st. But emergency cases are still handled by on-duty judges. I guess during this time, it would just really suck to get arrested in Australia and your case just be deemed not important because you're just sitting there for, 2 months until they get ready to come back? Like I said, Australia is just a little backward. Now, the one that was on duty at the time was Judge Bill Martin, and it should have been an easy day because it was a jail day, which, if you don't know, in Australia just means the inmates would come and appeal against sentences handed down by strict magistrates. Even then, it was a joke amongst judges that on Australia Day, quote, "The standard joke was that the on-duty judge would increase the sentence of the first bloke through the door, so the rest would withdraw their appeals, allowing the court staff to slip off down to the leafy beer garden for a pleasant out-of-session session. The inmates were not too concerned about the outcome, as as win or lose, it was a day out of their moldy cells. That's just more of my evidence that Australia is just kind of backwards because why do that to people? Like, if I've got, like, I don't know. Like, just imagine you were, like, drunk or something like that, and you get a stupid sentence or a high fucking ticket, and you want to appeal it. And you're like, you don't want to pay $500 for going 2 miles over the speed limit? $1,000. Enjoy your weekend. Happy Australia Day. Anyway, Bill Martin and his tip staff are law clerk Ernie Trotter. A law clerk is a legal professional who assists judges or lawyers by researching or drafting legal opinions, as well as performing various clerical tasks. They help to prepare cases for the court, and advising on legal matters. Essentially, law clerks just make sure the legal proceedings are well informed and organized. So now we got that out the way. Judge Martin was hoping for a quiet afternoon, so he hardly noticed when a denim-clad Mark Reed slipped into the court wearing sunglasses, eyeing him down with a sawed-off shotgun hidden in his pants in an insane plan to free his friend. Reed had walked into the county court, asked the nearest policeman which of the courts was in session, of which there were only two. I walked into the first one. I saw Judge Martin was the first cab off the rank. I climbed up onto the judge's bench, put the gun to his head, and demanded Jimmy's release. I knew it would never work, but I had given him my word to try. Just as a little side tangent here, it's taking all my willpower not to read these in like heavy Australian accents. Like, none of the quotes are even particularly like Australian or use like slang or anything like that. It's just I know it's in Australia, you know? That's bothering me. Anyway, I'll continue. Now, what Reed didn't know was that Trotter was raised in a Salvation Army family and would, quote, join the services after a romance with a Ballarat girl went sour, and he would spend 25 years in the Army, retiring as a sergeant major. He was an accomplished drummer who had joined the Army in a time where they weren't expected to see much combat until Trotter was stationed in Malaya for 2 years, where musicians would double as stretcher bearers to bring rations to troops on patrol. In that time, Trotter would be exposed to actual combat. With Trotter being more well-trained than Judge Martin, he instantly noticed when he saw a man enter the court in what he described as a denim suit, but remained unconcerned, knowing there were at least 12 policemen just outside the courtroom door, so he had his head down in his paperwork. When he said Reed would, quote, he rushed past me and sprang up the steps to the bench. He then produced a single-barrel sawed-off shotgun from under his jacket and knelt to the left of the judge, pressing the barrel against his throat. Ashamed that I had been unable to prevent this incident, I stood on the bottom of the step and indicated to the judge that I would follow his lead. Judge Martin bravely pushed the gun aside and stood and went through the bench door with Denham in hot pursuit. At this point, the judge turned to face the assailant and gave him a hefty kick in the knackers. That's right, guys. This badass judge made a break for it, then once he split from him, he turned and kicked an armed gunman in the nuts.
Oh, look, an eagle!
I don't know if they had black Air Forces in Australia at the time, but I guarantee you if they did, the judge would definitely have been wearing them. Anyway, Trotter would leap up to the door and push Reed against the frame and grab the shotgun barrel. According to underworld folklore, it has long been held that Judge Martin broke the stunned silence after he grabbed the barrel, yelling, "Will someone get this bastard off of me?" Now, in this article I was reading, it says bastard has been used to replace a word not fit for a family newspaper, but everywhere I looked, it just said the quote was bastard. I couldn't find it saying anything else, but, you know, maybe if you're Australia, you can leave it in the comments and let me know. Anyway, according to Trotter, the judge didn't utter a word, but someone did. While wrestling Reed for the gun, the former military man would yell, "Give me the fucking thing." Reed would say he recalls some swearing, but was unsure where it came from because, quote, I was shocked to hear such foul language in the hallowed hall of justice, as I have never been a big swearer myself. Brother, what the actual heck are you talking about right now? You're trying to hold a judge hostage, but you're shocked that he cursed at you? Okay, Chopper. Chopper just seems to be an enigma in that way, the type to hurt you, then ask if you're okay afterwards. Now, it wasn't his goal to kill or hurt anyone, as Reed believes he had rendered the round in the barrel harmless by removing the shot from the cartridge. Later at his court trial, he was shocked to learn the blank would have killed the judge if discharged at close range, with Reed even saying, "I remember the judge opened his mouth and the barrel slipped in. I'm glad I didn't pull the trigger. It would have killed him." Old Ernest was a military fellow with his big English mustache. It took him quite a bit of bravery to attack. I was 18 stones of muscle, 259 pounds in freedom units for all my Americans. I was bench pressing 330 pounds, and I had a gun. Now, while Trotter would wrestle with Reed, the police would finally make their way into the courtroom and pull his legs from under him. They'd place Reed in the seats next to him, where apparently none of them had handcuffs on him because they had to use their belts to restrain him. Trotter says the judge was the real hero. If it wasn't for his leadership, I wouldn't have done anything. Although it was Trotter himself who just 18 months later was presented with the Queen's Gallantry Medal by then Governor Sir Henry Winnicky. While Reed was sentenced to 13 years for attempted abduction, he said, "I'm glad he got the medal. He deserved it," and would go on to write Judge Martin to apologize, the judge writing back to say he knew it wasn't personal. He was a real gentleman, according to Reed. Trotter didn't hold any grudges, later saying, "I bear him no ill will and regret his state of health," when he found out Reed was diagnosed with cancer in 2012. Now, this is where Amos Atkinson comes back into the picture, and we get into the story that's in the title and probably the thumbnail. Out of prison by the time Reed pulled this stunt, he was determined to save Reed. So inspired by his idol's own plan, he decided to hatch one of his own, not one to learn from the mistakes of others. Atkinson and Robert Williams, another member of the Overcoat Gang, on the evening of March 31st, 1978, would put their plan into motion.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Except Atkinson and Williams were stopped by the police. I'm not sure why they were stopped in the first place, whether it was just a routine traffic stop or there was some type of suspicion. But the pair were stopped, and that's all that matters. And the pair were armed with sawed-off shotguns, just like his mentor.
If you jump a subway turnstile, you might just get off with a warning from the police. But if you jump a turnstile carrying a loaded gun and smoking a joint, then maybe you need your ass kicked. When you see flashing police lights in your mirror, stop immediately. Everybody knows, if the police have to come and get you, they're bringing an ass kicking with them.
Panicking, the two would abandon their car with the police in hot pursuit. They would take refuge in the Waiters Club restaurant with at least 30 patrons still dining while they tried to figure out a plan. In the meantime, police would section off both ends of Myers Place, alley full of several restaurants and bars that the Waiters Club was located at. The Waiters Club siege had begun. So, the Waiters Club, founded in 1947 as a private club for off-duty waiters to unwind after work, eventually opening up to the public by the 1970s. By the 1970s, it would be established as a simple Italian eatery, specializing in no-frills classics and cheap wine. Now, a lot of articles make it out to seem like the two were targeting the restaurant from the beginning. For what I can find, they just fled into the restaurant after they ran from the cops. I believe they were definitely probably going to go to another location, as the county court that Reed had been at was only 10 minutes away, and there was another Supreme Court that was only 7 minutes away. They had plenty of options until the police stopped them for some reason, so it's fair to say nobody was expecting what happened next. Least of all, Rogers Myers, then manager of Princess Theater, a local nonprofit center of arts, said, quote, "We finished our meals and were having a quiet chat when two men ran up the stairs brandishing sawed-off shotguns. One of them shot into the door frame, but after that it became a waiting game. They pushed me onto the floor in the serving area and poured wine and bolognese sauce all over me. Both men were upset and angry and had no idea how to get out of the situation." The fact that they were panicking so much also is what leads me to believe that they definitely weren't intending to come here, because while they have more hostages than they would have had they gone to the courthouse, they're panicking, and these people are, I don't want to say less valuable, but to them less for their means. And I get it's a high stress situation and all, but why are you pouring sauce all over this poor guy? He's just trying to have dinner with friends. Like, you ruined his meal, not the other way around. You don't got to be a dick about it. Anyway, Atkinson would regain his composure and would soon come up with the idea to grab a doctor from the hostages and have him tell the police his demands, which were that would be released in the next 24 hours or he'd start killing hostages. The police, not wanting to comply, became more and more nervous. As 4 hours would go by, the police officers were surprised when another hostage named Wendy McNamara was released with another demand the police would quickly comply with. Atkinson wanted his mother. The police quickly contacted Atkinson's mother, Alva Atkinson, a frequent patron of the restaurant from what I could find, and sent for her to act as a police go-between. She would arrive in the early hours of the next morning wearing nothing but her house shoes and her dressing gown. Not waiting for police instructions, she would immediately enter the restaurant and began beating her son over the head with her handbag, telling him to stop being so stupid and give himself up. And Atkinson would do so. He would slowly start releasing hostages in groups of 4 to 5 over several hours, with the rest of the siege taking the full day and not fully ending till the next morning, with Myers, the manager of the Princess Theater, being in the third group of hostages. And he said after an interview at the Russell police station, he'd been home by 5 a.m. and to work on time the next day. After all the hostages were finally released, Atkinson would walk out and surrender quietly. Hewitt received 5 years where he was reunited with his mentor Reed, who after going back to prison came up with a plan to disable most of the other prison gangs with severe spinal damage, but would be betrayed and stabbed with a prison shank by Jimmy Lofton and several other prisoners in an attempt to collect the bounty put out on Reed's life. Shortly after this, in an effort to avoid an upcoming attack, made a fellow inmate chop his ears off with a homemade blade so he would be sent to medical. It worked, and this is how Reed would gain the nickname Chopper.
Brian? I'm gonna cut my ear off to prevent World War II.
And in an attempt to emulate his idol one last time, Atkinson would chop his ears off, which is just demented. Now, I couldn't find much more about Atkinson. It seems he disappeared and led a quiet life after this. The only thing I could find in an article in The Age, it says, Atkinson did his time in jail and was released. Although he still has problems when dining out, we understand during a robust race-related discussion with a South African gentleman in Venezuela fish and chip shop, Amos threw a large container of pickled onions at him. He missed. I love that they included that he missed because, you still haven't learned. You've been a loser for 20 years and have failed every time. Anyway, that's it for Amos. It seems he died in 2011 of natural causes. As for Jimmy and the other co-conspirators of the Reed stabbing, they would die in a mysterious prison fire that no one could ever pin back to Reed. As for Reed himself, who's worth an entire video on his own, was released from prison in 2000, where a movie based on his life called Chopper would be produced and released starring Eric Banya. And this skyrocketed him into fame. From books to movies to a whole...
Just a bloke. Just a good bloke down on his luck.
Well, you don't seem out of luck to me. You've written a bestseller.
Yeah, I know. And I can't even bloody spell. What about those poor bloody academics, those college graduates, battling their guts out to write some airy-fairy piece of exaggerated artwork, and there's a bloke sitting in a cell.
Was everywhere.
Hello, how the fuck are you? Chopper Reed here. Now, one thing I've known...
Reed was everywhere talking to everybody about anything. It seems in his later years he did soften up a lot more than he was when he was younger, becoming sort of a grandfatherly or uncle figure to the Australian community. With tons of posts and comments I've seen with people telling how they met him or how they seen him out in public, how nice he was, how he paid for their drinks, or how he did something fun for them, or things like that. Unfortunately, Reed would be diagnosed with liver cancer in April of 2012. He died from the illness on October 9th of 2013. And that ends our tale of prison escapes, nut kickings, and purse biddings. Thank you for watching. It would mean a lot if you could like and subscribe, leave a comment too. It helps me get better. If you stuck around to the end, thank you so much. Let me know any topics you think might fit with the channel, and I'll see about covering them in the future. And if you stuck around all the way to the end of the video, thank you. See what happens when you stick around to the end? You get an extra thank you. Hey, do me a favor, keep that extra thank you between me and you. I'm running kind of low right now, and I can't have everybody know I was giving them out. Good looking, man. Hey, this is Editing Lion King here. I just want to take the time real quick. I'll probably have a black screen with all the clips, I'll probably just have a black screen with all the people whose clips I used or something up while I'm talking over this. If you stuck around, I do want to thank you, but I'm just going to talk about real quick why I wanted to do this story in particular. So everywhere you look, you just see headlines. So everywhere you look, you just see headlines like, man kidnaps 30 people until his mother in siege. Man's mother hits him over the head with handbag, and that's usually the end of the headline, and it's just like a 30-word clip like, oh yeah, Amos Atkinson in 1978, his mother hit him over the head with a handbag to end the hostage situation. But I feel like it does such a disservice to these stories and these moments in history because it's so much more than just a headline. Especially when I got to deep diving. None of these even mention that the person that he's trying to get released is Mark Chopper Reed, a super famous Australian criminal who, in doing research for this video, I found out about, and I think that's super interesting. That might even be a video in itself. So I really do just feel like it does him a disservice not to mention the details, like the fact that they were in a gang together, or the fact that Chopper had done pretty much the exact same thing a couple months ago and that he was imitating him. The fact that Amos cut off his ears like Chopper. I see everyone mentioning, Chopper cutting off his ears, but never like the 19-year-old who cut off his ears to follow. And then even like follow ups on Amos, it seems like nobody really cared about that after he stopped committing crimes, you know? But even still, the story to me isn't just, some idiot criminal and his mother comes, like a comedy sketch or something like that. It to me shows like how much this mother loved him that she instantly got up, came out, dressed in what she was wearing, and, was willing to do that for him, wanting to see her son do better. Even on the gravestone, if you'll notice, it says, always mama's dear boy or something like that. And, this is more than just a story of a mother, strictly parenting her children or something like that. It's the story of a mother doing everything she can for 7 children and one of them kind of getting away into like a very negative influence. Even the story of Chopper Reed is kind of a story of, because he swears he never hurt, innocent people or anything like that, and all his crimes are usually against other criminals. So that's but even the story of Chopper Reed itself is so interesting to me because of the redemption he goes through and later in life becoming like so famous and stuff like that. There's just so many clips of him of rap career and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm done yapping. Thank you all so much if you stuck around this long just listening to me yap. And if you want to leave, like, subscribe, it would mean so much to me because I do care so much about these videos, these topics. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I promise it'll be good.